Okay, take two. Well, it's very good to see all of you once again. Thankful that we have another Lord's Day to be reassembled, and for this an hour's worth of Bible study, Bible class, to continue through our study of the book of John. We are in John 6, picking up after the events of feeding of the 5,000 with the 5 loaves and 2 fishes. And where we ended was at verse 15, when Jesus therefore perceived that they would come and take him by force to make him a king, he departed again into a mountain himself alone. And we were referencing to the fact of just how it is with people back then and people today when it comes to these things that are supposed to have spiritual significance, but what are people wanting to get focused on? The physical. All right, he's feeding us with loaves and fishes. This is a wonderful miracle that he's performed. We like this element, so let's stop and let's make him king. Which, of course, according to the prophecies, he is supposed, the Messiah, the prophet, is supposed to become from the line of David, and thus it is supposed to also be sitting upon David's throne. So it's an element of, yes, this is what is being taught, but there again, you're missing the kind of king that he is supposed to be. And that everything that they are focused on is purely physical. And we made the connection last week how it is that this is not his mission. And just as Adrian pointed out, that this is a prime example of Jesus knowing what his purpose was and is, and that he's not come to sit on a physical throne. And what's going to be shown, or what was just shown with the miracle that he performed in feeding of the 5,000, but also in him meeting his apostles out on the sea, those miracles are going to teach that he's already superior and supreme and a ruler, not just in a physical essence, and that being in Jerusalem. He is already ruler over all creation. And we ended last time in discussing how that this is in fact the same temptation that was tried by Satan in Matthew chapter 4. Satan said, if you will bow down and worship me, then I will give unto you all the kingdoms of the earth. Now, if we do not have our wits about us, and we're not thinking logically and clearly, then we're not going to pick up on the problems that are being made, or the problems with these false promises inside of the temptation. When you think about that statement, and Satan saying, well, if you'll bow down and worship me, I'll give you all the kingdoms of the earth. What's wrong with that statement and what it is that he's trying to promise?
Satan owns nothing.
Okay, Satan doesn't own anything. So how are you going to promise to give me everything when you don't own anything? All right, so that's number one. What's the next?
Jesus owns everything.
Okay, Jesus is already ruler over all these things, and that's going to be the lesson with the storm. And that's the lesson that his apostles are needing to learn. Is that in that very moment, it's not all about just sitting on a physical throne inside of Jerusalem. It's much bigger than this. Or it's much bigger than that, rather. So when we're considering how it was that Jesus dealt with the same temptation, though it's packaged differently, he departed again into a mountain himself alone. Mark tells us that Jesus is actually involved in sending the people off himself. And then the apostles go on their mission across the sea. So he's alone with himself, or by himself once again in the mountain, communing with God. And then that brings us to the next element of John 6, and that with the apostles in the midst of the Sea of Galilee, in the midst of the storm. And again, the message being presented to us is that Jesus is King of Kings. Not will be, as though it's in the future. It's now present tense. He has that power, he has that authority, and he has that ability to rule and to command whatever his will it is that he desires. So, verse 16, we have this being stated about these events. When even was come, his disciples went down unto the sea, and entered into a ship, and went over the sea toward Capernaum, and it was now dark, and Jesus was not come to them. This is where, again, as we've mentioned, needing to slow down and to think about these things as they're playing out. This is a really weird situation. But it's difficult for us, well, I'll say some of us, who are not used to being around seas and being around oceans, and particularly having that being a means of transportation. So with us being, with you guys being in a landlocked state, you might read through this and just, well, nothing really jumps out to you. But what's wrong, or what is problematic, or what's confusing with this situation?
They didn't wait for him.
Okay, they're not waiting for him, but we'll find from another account, we'll find out why. But what's another?
Don't go in the water when it's dark.
Okay, you don't sail at night. So, with my family being overseas, and the kind of work that my dad was involved in doing, we lived on the capital island, but he did work on some of the outer islands inside of the chain. And the only way to get to those islands was by boat. And it's just a tiny little thing with fisherman engine on the back, and you're trying to trek across the ocean going to these other islands. One of the things I always remembered was they never traveled at night. And it's just because you don't know what's going to happen out there. Storm could rise up, engine could stop, just lose your bearings, all these kind of things. You did not do that kind of thing unless it's just absolutely necessary. And so that's the same type of situation here. Here you have trained men of this sea, of this area. Most of the apostles are from Galilee.
And fishermen.
And they're fishermen, and they know you do not set out at night. And if there's one thing we know from studying our Bibles about the Sea of Galilee, there's a lot of storms that happen on the Sea of Galilee. So why would they do this? Why would they just go out at this point? Why not just wait till morning? That's where knowing the other cross-references, knowing the other passages, comes into play. Straightway, Mark 6:45, straightway he constrained his disciples to get into the ship, to go to the other side before unto Bethsaida, while he sent the people away. So they're doing this, they are obeying what they're being told to do. So up to this point, when we're thinking about this, it's a bit of a situation to where, okay, the apostles know a little bit more, or they are in a position to where they know better, if you will, about when to sail, not to sail, but they have enough recognition of what Jesus' authority is as their master, teacher, and their rabbi, that if he says to go, they go.
You would think, though, that Peter, being the problem child that he is, would have gone, but Master,
Right.
we're going at night.
Right?
At least it's not recorded.
Yeah.
But,
Very likely that could be going on internally.
yeah.
And that is, like you said, it's just not recorded for us.
Maybe gave Peter a break.
Right, yeah.
I was just thinking also, because as we were discussing last week, their thought was, we're going to be held to a higher position, and why are you sending these people away? So their anger overshadowing what they know just because they're, their selfish anger.
Yeah.
They're thinking of themselves. Just get the boat out there.
Yeah.
It's like you're not thinking.
Just a begrudging type of attitude,
Yep.
just out of frustration. And we'll get to that here in just a moment from Mark's account. But as we discussed in our, I think our class briefly last time, but definitely in our sermon, so you have Jesus and he's telling you, hey, go do this thing. Go take the ship out, traveling by night. What would you expect from your trip?
Not to have any problems.
Okay. Not to have any issues. All right, we're doing what Jesus says. Everything should be fine. But this is being done on purpose so as to teach the apostles a lesson because, as we mentioned, they are also having a problem. John 6:18, and the sea arose by reason of a great wind that blew. So when they had rowed about 25 or 30 furlongs, they see Jesus walking on the sea and drawing nigh unto the ship, and they were afraid. But he saith unto them, it is I, be not afraid. Then they willingly received him into the ship, and immediately the ship was at the land whither they went. So here they are. They're doing what Jesus said to do. This should be a fine and dandy trip across the Sea of Galilee. Pleasure cruise. Hey, we're sailing by night. Got ourselves a good view. Everything's going to be great. No. It's not how it goes all the time. Even when you are doing your best to obey what God says, storms are still going to pop up. So that's a lesson for them, and it's certainly a lesson for us. Because, and for everybody, throughout the community that we would try to reach out to, because most have the mindset of, oh, I become a Christian, my life just automatically gets better. Well, your life will get better, but not necessarily in the way that you think that it should. And most people think, well, okay, my finances will be in order, my health will be in order, my social standing will be in order, just everything will fall into place. It's not usually...
Those are the kind of people you want to, no, wake up.
Yeah, well,
It's not like that.
come into reality here. And that even as when we get to the end of the book of John, and Jesus is alone with his apostles, and he's teaching them once again, and one of the main lessons that he's going to teach them is, they hated me, they're going to hate you. And the lesson is that the reason why they hate you is because they hated me, Jesus, first. So even with the Son of God and all the good that he's trying to do, in John chapter 6, he will further go into a very strong message about how that he has not come to do his own will, but the will of him that sent him. Everything that he was doing was for the purpose of pleasing the Father. And how was his life? Pretty difficult. Well, there's nothing pretty about it. It's just flat difficult. But yet, in that difficulty, and even in the midst of this, he's facing temptation. His cousin has been put to death. All these things are swirling around. He's having to help these people, feed these people, teach these people. And now he's having a problem with his apostles. Just always seems like it's one thing after another. But yet Jesus kept going. Okay, this is par for the course. So let's just handle it. Let's just deal with it. So when we're thinking about this and being a servant of God, that does not make you exempt from facing the problems of life.
Diplomatic immunity.
Yeah, right. If anything, it makes you more susceptible to the problems of life. But once again, we have been presented for these apostles. Here they are in the midst of another problem, and it's a storm, and it's a storm that they cannot manage. So just like with the situation, the problem of feeding of the 5,000. Okay, Philip, what are we going to do? I don't know. All we've got is 200 penny worth. And that's not going to be enough to feed everybody. Andrew chimes in. I don't know what we're going to do either. There's a little kid here. He's got 5 loaves and 2 fishes. But what is that among so many? Okay, we have a problem that's bigger than we can handle. Here they are in the midst of the storm, and they're realizing they're rowing about 20 or 30 furlongs. The wind is blowing is contrary to them, and it's just another realization. I cannot of my own strength paddle through this storm. So what are you going to do?
Seek for help.
Okay, seek for help. And where is it that you're going to go?
To Jesus.
I need the Lord's help. I need God's help to be able to manage through this problem that I'm facing. And as we watch this situation, and then we move into the time frame where the church is brought into existence, and we see the majority of our brethren of the first century are living this way all the time. They are constantly in the midst of a storm. They're living on the edge. And when you're living your life on a constant state of razor's edge, to where this could fall apart at any moment, then you're always aware of your vulnerability. You're always aware of your weaknesses. And that you're in constant need. You're always in need of God's help and God's supply. God's wisdom, God's instruction. Okay, what are my options? And then to operate off of that. So John records this in this fashion. Jesus walking on the sea. They see Jesus walking on the sea, drawing nigh unto the ship. They were afraid. He saith unto them, it is I, be not afraid. But let's go back to Mark's account. Mark 6:48. And he, Jesus, saw them toiling in rowing. For the wind was contrary unto them, and about the 4th watch of the night cometh unto them, walking upon the sea, and would have passed by them. But when they saw him walking upon the sea, they supposed it had been a spirit, and cried out. For they all saw him, and were troubled. And immediately he talked with them, and saith unto them, be of good cheer, it is I, be not afraid. He went up unto them into the ship, the wind ceased, and they were sore amazed in themselves beyond measure, and wondered. So going back to verse 48. He saw them toiling and rowing, for the wind was contrary unto them. We've used this in our discussions before. Back in Matthew, I believe this cross-references to Matthew 14. And we made the point then, but we need to make the point now. Where is God when I am struggling to stay afloat?
Right there.
He's right there watching. When the waves of life are washing over me again and again, and just... So again, I don't know how many of you have actually experienced this, but when you're out in the ocean, swimming around, and you find yourself being taken down by a wave, and then you're scrambling to get back up so you can get air just to be met with another wave and being brought back down, that's frightening.
That happened to you?
It's happened a few times living overseas, yeah. Because you're just doing everything you can just to make...
How'd you get through it?
You just got to keep going.
Or I thought maybe someone coming out and helped you.
No. So most of the time that would happen, we would be on not the lagoon side, the inside of the
Ocean.
the
Island.
It's not just an island. My geography is leaving me.
I was never good at geometry either.
So most of the island chains are just the top of a volcano. And I just can't remember what that's called. But anyways, you have the lagoon side, which is really nice and pretty and calm. But then you have the reef side, which the coral goes out for a certain amount of feet and then just drops off. But that's where the best waves were. And so we would boogie board or bodyboard out on the reef side. But of course, with it being on that side, it's the most dangerous side. So I'm pretty sure what helped me in bringing me back up was with the boogie boards. You have the straps on your ankle like you do a surfboard. So the board is trying to make its way up to the top before you are. But still, even with that trying to pull you up, you get met with another wave and you just tumble back underneath. So yeah, it happened a few times. And so you think about that kind of scenario, and sometimes that's how life can feel. You're just doing everything you can to just stay afloat, and then there's just something else that comes back up on top of you. All right. God knows that. He sees us toiling, He sees us rowing, He sees us trying to do our absolute best in following after His will, and things just don't seem to go our way. All right, we're not alone. He watches because He cares. And He's watching because He knows about that.
Question is, it says that he was about to pass by.
Mm-hmm.
Is this like you're seeing him out there, and if it's a timing thing to where like I'm right here, you can ask for my help. No. All right. Well, I'm just gonna keep going then. Is that a case? Is this a case for that, or?
I would argue that is.
Okay.
And that it's similar to, so the idea of him, that he was walking upon the sea, would have passed by them, and that it's the similar situation of leaving from Galilee as he's fixing to go to Jerusalem, and he's passing through Samaria, but his face is set. The apostles, I think it's Luke, records that for us, that he records for us that he's passing through Samaria, but onward to Jerusalem because his face was set on going to Jerusalem. And that's the case here. He is set on his course. He's set on his mission. And that it's just, okay, you guys are out here rowing and toiling and making your way, but this is where I'm heading. And that even in that situation, so this is not the same situation of Peter crying out that he would come out and walk with him. But let's say instead of them having Jesus come out on the boat, what if they had said, well, Master, let us come with you? Then what about that? They could have done it. But it's all about, so it's that it is a give and take type of situation, relationship in all of this, and that yes, Jesus is wanting to help us, and Jesus is there to help, and that He's seeking after us, but you have to seek after Him too. And that if they had just let Jesus walk on by without making any type of request or any type of cry out for help, then it's just, okay, you must not want my help. So that's the part that's playing into this when we're considering all of this that's going on, because we get ourselves into that type of mindset too. And that, okay, life is hard, but then we keep trying to go our own way and trying to figure things out on our own, and we never stop to ask God for help. Then okay, it's a whole situation. It's as Jesus said in Matthew 7, ask and you shall receive. Well, what if you never ask? You're not going to receive. And it's even what James wrote. You ask and you have not because you ask amiss. You don't ask by faith. So it's all coming down to this element of requesting that has to be made. And that Jesus, God, they're not going to force themselves onto anybody. If you want the help, ask for it. But if you're not going to ask, then Okay, I'm just going to keep going. So they're rowing and they're toiling, and he comes unto, or is contrary to them, about the fourth watch of the night, he cometh unto them. Anybody remember round about what time that is from our Matthew study?
2 o'clock.
Close, 3 a.m. So this is about 3 in the morning before Jesus ventures out to them. Now you remember John's account tells us it was already dark. So even was come, it's already dark. They set out rowing. They're rowing and rowing and rowing, and they're rowing until the fourth watch, which is about 3 a.m. Then Jesus ventures out. Now, just as we mentioned in our sermon, had Jesus come immediately when the storm arose, or if Jesus had been in the boat with them the whole entire time, then what about all of this situation that we're reading about?
They wouldn't have had their personal growth of realizing where they're at in life, where they need to be constantly for the rest of their life.
Okay. They never would have had this experience. They never would have had this opportunity for, as Jamie said, a personal growth. To be able to witness and to view this wonderful sight in the midst of pure chaos. And then, I mean, you just think about something like this. A man walking on water. That's just impossible. But yet, they were able to see it. And it's because of the storm. There was no storm, then there would be no walking on water. So they had to toil through the storm to be able to receive this. And so that goes back into some of our other studies, especially the idea of caring to correct and like changing our viewpoint of persecution, suffering, tribulation, and all of that, and how it is that nobody's wanting to go through that kind of stuff. Nobody would enjoy, I would not enjoy having to go through this. But we get so fixated on the moment and the present distress and the present difficulty, and we lose sight of what can come from this. What wonderful thing is actually going to end up happening in going through the storm? And that's the dilemma that's within all of us. We want to stay comfortable, we want to stay safe, and we do all of these things in our life so as to try to do that. Home insurance, car insurance, life insurance, all these different things that people try to do so as to cushion themselves, where we live in this nice little bubble, and we think that that's good for us. But then what happens when the bubble pops?
Don't know what to do.
Don't know what to do. Not prepared. So it's going through stuff like this that brings about that element of preparation. What are you going to say?
I was going to say, there was a guy over in Idaho that I knew where he was working as an apprentice, making about $17 an hour. That's what he was starting out as. It was cold, it was hot, all that stuff. Well, he found a job at Murdoch's that paid the same, and I met him, Rachel and I met him after a while. I'm like, oh, I didn't know he was working here. He's like, yeah, well, I make the same here than I would over there. But he's not recognizing that pain and suffering is going to pay off once you either journey out or once you come to a certain spot. It's going to pay a lot more and all that stuff. He's just looking at the short term. Well, this is comfortable, this is nice, I don't have to work out in the cold or the heat, that's just not for me. So
that immediate satisfaction.
Yeah, I just wanted to put that into you're talking spiritual, I'm putting it into a physical, no, but putting it into the physical where people go with, well, I just want to stay where I'm at. comfortably when something greater is beyond that.
Yeah. But even with all of this, when we're thinking about, okay, here we are with the apostles, all of this is happening, and then verse 49, when they saw him walking upon the sea, they supposed it had been a spirit and cried out, for they all saw him. So if you're seeing him, then you should know who it is. And yet it says that they all saw him and were troubled. And immediately he talked with them and saith unto them, Be of good cheer, it is I, be not afraid. So here they are, thinking that, okay, this is some spirit or a ghost, which our modern word for ghost is from the Old English for guest. Here they are, they see the spirit or this ghost or guest that's walking upon the water. And then verse 51, even when he comes into the ship and the wind ceased, we have recorded that they were sore amazed in themselves beyond measure and wondered. Why do we have all of this descriptive language about the apostles? Just like none of this makes sense. Why are you guys acting this way? Why are you so troubled? And after all this has happened, you're sore amazed beyond measure, and you're just wondering, why? Well, Jamie already did it. No, she doesn't have to say it. She signed it, putting God in a box. He just fed 5,000 people with 5 loaves and 2 fishes. Clearly, there's something about this guy.
Makes me wonder how we're ever going to get through to people, because they actually got to witness miracle after miracle after miracle from Christ himself, and we're taking this word and we're going to try to convince people with it. And it's like, what chance do we have when they actually have Jesus right there performing all this stuff to them and showing them? It seems like we would say the same thing if Christ was right here and we saw him perform these miracles, that it would strengthen us. But obviously they're seeing it and they're not getting it.
Yeah.
It just seems like that if I saw it myself, that I don't know, I would be convinced, but obviously I might not be, because they're obviously falling away too. Just as fast as they can see it, they fall away.
Well, and to tag on to that, they're seeing it, but Jesus even still is referring, it is written. So the word is that powerful. But why is it that powerful? What about the word is more powerful that witnessing it and seeing the miracles doesn't convince their brain?
So all of that's answered in verse 52. For they considered not the miracle of the loaves, for their heart was hardened. Doesn't matter what you say, does not matter what you do. If the person that you're trying to help has a heart that's been hardened, can't do anything with it. Just can't. Now, when we are thinking about in this situation as to why it is that the hearts of the apostles would be hardened in this situation, it would tie back into what we were discussing previously about, well, the people are wanting to make Jesus king and Jesus sends them away. We've got this huge multitude of people that are following after us. Okay, we're riding high. And then Jesus sends everybody off. But what are you doing that for? We just took care of them. They can now all take care of us. But then Jesus says, no, we're not going to do that. They need to go on. You guys need to go on across the sea. And I'm going to stay here. And it's just, man, whatever. Just that frustration, aggravation with the entire process. Because, I mean, you just think about it. All these people have just been fed, and so Jesus performs the miracle, but he gives it to the apostles to then go out and to disperse to everybody. Who's getting all the thank yous? Who's getting all the appreciation?
The apostles.
The apostles are, because they're the go-between between the one providing to the one actually getting. So here we are getting more recognition, getting more applause, getting more appreciation, and then, well, that's got to go. Send all that away. And that would create enough aggravation amongst the apostles, and that we know from Luke's account of this entire situation, what's going to end up happening next is a fight is going to break out over what topic?
Who's the greatest?
Who's the greatest? So that problem is swirling in the midst of this. Because as we said, just think about what that would mean for the 12 if Jesus was made king at that very moment.
So they really, really, just going over this again, I'm just summarizing it. They really didn't get it.
No.
They didn't get what that was all about with the food.
And so
Their servant.
yeah, and so Mark is even recording that for us, for they considered not. They did not perceive. They are not understanding. They're just not comprehending. It's not clicking with them as to what all of this is about. And just as we said, in thinking about this, like this being a history lesson about a wilderness, all of this chapter, the next bit of this chapter is going to be about a discussion of Moses and the feeding of the multitude with manna in the wilderness. Well, wow, here we are right in that situation once again. Here we are in the wilderness, got a multitude of people. What are we going to feed them with? Let's feed them with bread. This seems really familiar.
I think I read it in books.
Yeah. But it's just not, they're just not getting it. And even with what's transpiring and the walking out on the water, just passing by them, that even in the midst of that, so even as we're thinking about this, can we not understand just from this personal standpoint of the frustration of trying to do something, and it just not setting in? And how, so with me recently and learning how to drive a school bus, backing up a school bus, learning that was highly frustrating. And even then, it wasn't actually, it was one element of the backing process in the driving test. You have to offset pulling up and then backing back in as if you're coming in and out of an alley. Most of that I'm fine with, but there's this one element of the test, which actually my trainer wasn't doing this right, so she was getting me frustrated for no reason. So you're lined up straight, you got a set of cones on your left, you drive up, you exit out of those cones, but then she was having me stop my rear wheels in between one cone over here and one cone over here. And all that is to gauge how good is your depth perception. And we were at that for hours. And I'd either stop just a little bit in front of the cone or a little bit behind the cone. I just could not get it square up with the wheel. And it's just, okay, let's do it again. You're just getting frustrated. I can see that going on here. Here we are, we're following after you, we're going after your lead. And it's just getting frustrating.
Did you finally figure it out?
Not yet. Well, like I said, it's not really part of the test. But yeah, no, I still have not gotten how to gauge in my mirror where that back wheel is just yet.
I would just say, as they're still not getting it, is they have to follow his lead. He's not telling them everything, and when he does, they're still not listening. But they have to learn by the experience,
Yeah.
because they're, even if he says something, but they don't know, and they're frustrated because all along we know they're thinking physical and they can't move past that, and they have to do all this personal growth by going through all of these things, all these layers of everything that Jesus sets out for
Right.
for them. And even if he told them, it wouldn't have the same impact.
Yep. And even to tell everything and just, okay, you have the knowledge, but you don't have the wisdom that goes along with the knowledge. So knowledge is intellect, but wisdom is knowing what to do with knowledge. And it really is, it is a situation very similar to parents dealing with children. Okay, I can tell you and tell you and tell you, but just, you're not going to learn until you actually do it. And, it's going to hurt, and you're going to have to cry and suffer through it, but if that's what it takes to get the message through, then okay, that's what we've got to do. And so what we're finding is patience on all sides. But what we find with the apostles is that they never give up. And that's the key to it. How is it that Jesus keeps going along with them even though we have situations like this? It's because they keep going. And even as we're about to read in this chapter that the multitude is going to stop following Jesus, and Jesus is going to turn to them, are you going to leave? Where are we supposed to go? So at that point, things are starting to set in a little bit more. And that's just, okay, yeah. The multitude is left on their own. So right there, they're learning a lesson about the crowd. The crowd is not going to stick with you all the time. One moment they're there when they're getting what they want, but then you start taking that stuff away and they're ready to leave you. So that stuff really doesn't matter. And it's the realization of, well, okay, if the crowd is turning their back on us now, then that means they would do it again later. And at this point, the only one that they have seen to be consistent with them, to never leave them alone, has been Jesus. It's just, you've taken care of us so far, why would we leave now? So with all of this swirling, as we said, here's the lesson that they are getting and the lesson that we're receiving as well with this miracle. He did not need them to make him king because he rules over all creation already. Why would he need for these people to make him king? What authority do they have to make him king? Just like we said about the devil. What power? What does he actually own? Nothing. Okay, when I start thinking about it from that standpoint, then I can look through the temptation. See, I can look through the glitz, I can look through the glamour, and I can look through the bait that's there on the trap to actually see the trap. You don't have any power to give me this anyways. And then, on top of the fact, Jesus was in charge already. Walking on the water, walking on elements, steps into the boat, the winds cease. And he's proving to his disciples he did not make a mistake in sending the people away. That he has full understanding, full comprehension of what's transpiring, and that does not have an outline on it. Give me just a second here. Where was that? Oh, it does have an outline. It's just too small. Okay, one moment. Yep. So just very, very quickly. Hold on just a second.
Dead air.
Get rid of that. Make that a little bit bigger so that we can see it. And 22. Whoops. Okay, 22. Really? All right, dead air, dead air. All right. Now, so then John 6:22. Don't know why that's popping up like that. Oh, it looks okay. The day following, when the people which stood on the other side of the sea saw that there was none other boat there, save that one whereinto his disciples were entered, and that Jesus went not with his disciples into the boat, but that his disciples were gone away alone. Howbeit, there came other boats from Tiberias nigh unto the place where they did eat bread, after that the Lord had given thanks. When the people therefore saw that Jesus was not there, neither his disciples, they also took shipping, came to Capernaum, seeking for Jesus. And when they had found him on the other side of the sea, they said unto him, Rabbi, when camest thou hither? Now, we might look at this, and we would see the action of these people and think, well, great. This is a good group of people. They have a desire to come and find Jesus. It says right there in verse 24, they came seeking for Jesus. But this chapter is going to teach us something about people. That not everyone that is seeking for Jesus is seeking him for the right reason. They ask him a question. Rabbi, Master, Teacher, when camest thou hither? But then notice how Jesus answers the question. Jesus answered them and said, Verily, verily, I say unto you, ye seek me not because ye saw the miracles, but because ye did eat of the loaves and were filled. Jesus does not even answer their question about when. Skips over that and gets right to the point. Very similar to what he did with Nicodemus. Oh, Rabbi, we know that you're a man sent from God, because no man can do these miracles that thou doest except God be with him. Okay, Nicodemus, except a man be born again, he will not see the kingdom of heaven. And it's just, whoa, what are we even talking about here? You seek me not because you saw the miracles, but because you did eat of the loaves and were filled. What does that mean? What do you mean we didn't see the miracles? You're saying in the sentence, we didn't see the miracles, but because you did eat of the loaves and were filled, is why you're here. We have eyes, so obviously we saw what you did. Yeah, you saw it, but you did not see it. How does that make sense?
You didn't see it for what it is.
Okay, didn't see it for what it is.
They're talking about the spiritual they're supposed to be looking for, and they're looking for physical.
Okay, that spiritual application. It's what we just saw a moment ago in Mark 6:52. They considered it not. Matthew 13 and 14, therefore speak I to them in parables, because they seeing see not, and hearing they hear not. And here's the reason why. Neither do they understand. And that word understand means to consider or to put together. You're not piecing any of this together like you should be. And in them is fulfilled the prophecy of Isaiah, which saith, By hearing ye shall hear, and shall not understand, and seeing ye shall see, and shall not perceive.
What was that one?
What is it?
Which one did you just go?
Matthew 13 and 14. Matthew chapter 13, verses 13 and 14. So Jesus is pointing out to them, they just got the physical benefit. Yeah, you are being filled physically. Your hunger, your physical hunger is gone away. But they did not put together the time at which this was happening. What's the time frame? Right before Passover. And the Passover is a reminder of what?
God's mercy.
God's mercy. God's taking care of you. God's providing for you. You didn't put together the time, the place. We're in the wilderness. You didn't put together about the elements that you're being fed with. And because you're not putting all of that together, you're not putting it together as to who Jesus is. He is not just a prophet. He is not just a good man. He is not just a miracle worker. He is God. He's doing all of the same things that God did for your fathers. And just not understanding it. Just not seeing it. Just not getting it. That then will lead into his discussion, his teaching to them, pulling from that Old Testament history. Labor not for the meat which perisheth, but for that meat which endureth unto everlasting life, which the Son of Man shall give unto you, for him hath God the Father sealed. Establishing for them, yes, I'm doing these things for you physically, but that is just to emphasize what is being done spiritually. And so it's the same type of situation that we're living in today. And we've made this connection in other classes, but we'll make it again. Everything that we will do in our next hour when we're assembled together for worship, that's all things which are physical. Singing, praying, partaking of the Lord's Supper, taking up a collection. All of those things are involved with physical elements. But behind those physical elements are spiritual applications. There are things that we're supposed to be learning, reflecting on, remembering, meditating on. And even as we consider those elements, and then you even move it over into things like water baptism. Is it not then easier, it should be easier for people to comprehend that just as with all of this, okay, all of this is physical, but it has a spiritual reason behind it. So what about being baptized in water? Yeah, that's physical, but just because it's physical does not mean that it is completely removed from spiritual application, from a spiritual purpose, something that can be something that's going on the inside. That's what's supposed to be happening here. But as he said, you're just not seeing it. So with that, we'll stop at 26, pick up 27 in this debate / sermon that Jesus is going to end up using or presenting to them, dealing with Moses, the manna from heaven, and the misunderstanding that these people had about that whole situation. They end up misquoting a portion of the Old Testament to try to prove their point. So if you want to try to figure out what that is, that'll be one of the questions for next time. If you can pinpoint where they misquoted. So in John 6, they're going to try to bring up the Old Testament. And in bringing up the Old Testament, a cross-reference, they end up using it incorrectly. and Jesus has to correct them on it. But as we bring this to a close, any thoughts, comments on the walking out on water, the apostles and their difficulty, and even this, this little bit of seeing but not seeing? All right, going once, going twice, no hands. So then we will.